Okie dokie, folks, and welcome back to Monday Night Shaw right here on Backbreaker Podcasts with me, Kyle Shaw, a.k.a. The Canadian Goose, and my guest this week, of course, he's well known across Canada, even down into the States. It is the Weirdo hero, Ravenous Randy Myers. Randy, how are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing spectacular. Thank you so much for having me on your show, friend.
Hey, no problem. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I know you've been wrestling now for like a very long time. How long have you been wrestling for?
Oh, yeah, that makes me sound old. But yeah, no, I've been wrestling for a very long time indeed. I've been wrestling for 21 years, 20 years, 21 years, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to make you sound old because I still, like, if I was going to guess your age, I would venture to guess you're under 40.
I appreciate that. That is true. I am on the higher side, but I'm still under 40.
I mean, that's pretty impressive to have a 20-year wrestling career under your belt before you're 40.
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad. It shows that you spent your youth doing some you made some choices during your youth that you stuck to all these years, and that's good.
So, what was it that drew you to wrestling in the first place, that got you interested in your youth and wanted to pursue it?
Well, wrestling was just like I was a youth. Like I started in 2000, so I started at like the end of like the last really big boom of wrestling when wrestling was super popular, and so it was like the coolest thing in high school. At least I thought it was the coolest thing in high school, and I didn't care about anyone who disagreed with me. So I basically just like wrestling was so cool. Like it was Stone Cold and The Rock and Mick Foley and all that stuff that was like when I was 17, 18 that I started like felt like head over heels for. I'd always known wrestling was around, but it wasn't something that was like my thing until a friend of mine, Frank, that I was a friend I met in junior high. He introduced it to me, or like reintroduced it to me, and then I was like, this is something I need to do.
Right on. So, how did you go about finding your way into the wrestling business? Because I mean, at that time, I'm sure it was a little bit more closed doors than it is now.
Yeah, I know for sure. I was lucky enough to be born in Calgary, so that meant like that there was all sorts of different like opportunities that there weren't to other people. So Stampede Wrestling had restarted in 1999. So I started going to like some live shows then, and that was what kind of like was like the final deal breaker that was like, this is what I need to do. Not something I wanted to do. It turned to something I needed to do after I saw it live and was like infected by the joy of professional wrestling. So once that kind of happened, I was, like I said, I was in Calgary. Stampede Wrestling had started. They started airing their show on on A Channel at the time. And then I would go to the shows on Friday nights, and then 2 weeks later, the show would be aired on TV. So they would have commercials in between it for like BJ's Gym, which had a pro wrestling camp for kids at the time, and so Teddy Hart had these commercials that came on and were like, "If you want to be a professional wrestler, call this number." And they were on during the commercial breaks, and so I was like, "Oh, you know what? If I want to do this, there's a number right there on TV." So I just called the number and started there.
So is Ted Hart the one that trained you?
I trained in Ted Hart's pro wrestling camp is one way to say it.
Oh, okay. Why do you say it that way? Is it like an interesting story? Is there like a conglomerate of people
I don't think he trained anyone.
Or?
He didn't train. Ted didn't train anyone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he was basically like, he had a camp that was he was working with Stampede Wrestling at the time. And so he was like the young star, and him and TJ Wilson and Harry Smith were all having these like phenomenal matches at the shows. They were like in the undercard at the time, but you could tell that they were like the stars, where some of the people that were in the main event at the time were a little bit long in the tooth, or just, had been like, were older wrestlers at the time, as opposed to these young people that were my age. Mm-hmm. So seeing people doing stuff that was my age really like made it seem doable. So yeah, the pro wrestling camp was run at BJ's Gym, but Ted was being Ted at the time, so, which he always is. So I was trained by Harry Smith and by TJ Wilson.
Oh, okay. Solid.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they also trained MRB, right?
yeah, definitely. I was there. I was there at the time, and like, yeah, I helped in that process as well. So I'd started in 2000, and MRB started in 2005, 2004. So yeah, I was able to be around there to like kind of be a guiding wing there when the TJ and Harry were out on touring or whatever like that. So
Nice. So was it kind of like when once TJ and Harry ended up venturing off to like greener pastures, did you kind of become like the main guy in Alberta? Sort of.
yeah, I was the guy doing the training out of BJ's. So yeah, it kind of went through a couple different hands, but at that time, yeah, I was the main trainer out of BJ's for 2, 3 years. That up until like the close. So basically, yeah, I took over the camp from Tyson Kidd, who had basically done the majority of the training. Harry was there a lot of the time, but he was in and out. Where Tyson was like, you could set your watch to that he'd be there every day. So him and Natalia were there all the time, and then, like I said, Harry was in and out all the time. He was a constant fixture as well, and then yeah, Ted would be here and there.
Wow, that's that. I mean, that's definitely some like good pedigree to be learning from. I would imagine because like everybody knows what you know, Natty and TJ and Harry and even Ted to some extent have gone on to achieve in wrestling. That's pretty
For sure,
crazy.
yeah, no, definitely have. They had already achieved so much at that time when I first met them, and then they've gone on to do such great things now, which was something you could tell was going to happen. Like that's when I first saw them on the Stampede Wrestling shows. I could tell that there was just like something like untapped potential with these young stars.
Yeah, like I mean, I remember seeing them pop up once in a while on like you'd see like MLW would feature like T.J. Wilson and Harry Smith coming in for like this matches and stuff, and it was kind of it's weird thing because like when I think back to like mainstay like independent wrestling that I would seek out on video and stuff, like not a lot of it came from Alberta. Like it's weird because like there's
Yeah,
great
no,
wrestling going on here, but like you think of like Ring of Honor and CZW or Chikara, that kind of like stuff. But like for some reason, like I don't know why the Alberta scene is not like a talked about fixture of independent wrestling. You know what I mean?
for sure. There's lots of I could definitely. There's lots of different reasons I think that for that to be true. But yeah, it was definitely not a scene, and still isn't a scene. Canada, it's not Alberta, man. Like there's some stuff that comes out of Ontario. You know what I mean? But other than that, like there's not like what are the main promotions that are considered like the same level of the promotions you just spoke of out of Canada? There's like none.
Well, I mean, I know for a little while we had Impact was kind of like a Canadian wrestling promotion, but then now it seems to be it's back in the States.
Yeah, and I think that was only for name value only, really, more than anything else. Like, I mean, there was a lot of Canadians featured on it, and that was great. But that was all East Coast people. There was still nobody featured from the West Coast,
Yeah.
unless they were living in the East Coast at the time.
So you ended up like you started off in Calgary, like you said, but I know you also had quite a run out in BC. Is that where
Yeah,
you're currently still in BC?
yeah, I'm still out in Vancouver right now,
So
right this moment.
when you decided to leave Alberta and go to Vancouver, what sort of facilitated that decision? Was that like based on wrestling, or was that based on something else?
Oh, for sure, it was based on like wrestling. I'd kind of been wrestling at that point, not kind of. I had been wrestling for 10 years in the Alberta territory, as it were. And just like you just said, there were like there was nothing really happening. Like no one was biting, nothing was moving. It was kind of a stale pond at the time. So I had an opportunity with WWE in 2009, which didn't go through. So then I kind of was like, okay, so I've done everything there's to do in Alberta. there was like ECCW out here was doing some interesting stuff at the time, and seemed like it was a step in a different direction from what I was doing in Alberta, and like kind of turning my wheels there. So yeah, I kind of decided to make the move to just kind of, yeah, it was like a lateral move to a certain degree, just to like I say, most of Canadian wrestling's pretty much the same, but at least BC has a connection to some promotions in the States, where below Alberta, you're not going to get work in Montana.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any Montana wrestling federations that are.
No, right. And I found like I was tired of working in front of an audience that wasn't necessarily growing in progressiveness as well. I was struggling with that from the Alberta scene, where it felt like very much locked in a certain era of wrestling, and that if it didn't fit into those kind of boxes, that it was very hard to make any sort of headway or even do anything new. It felt like it's very much wanting to be stuck in a thing, and people like MRB have done the work to move that to another level, to progress it. But yeah, I'd done what I thought I could do, and it was just kind of, it was time to move on.
Was it just like, did you think that the fans were not really interested in seeing anything progressive, or was it like the promoters weren't willing to take the chance on presenting anything progressive? Like,
I would say both. I think that people kind of get used to things a certain way, and then think that that's always going to work, and then see things from the past and then try and reiterate the past. The amount of Stampede Wrestling revivals that have existed, trying to bring back that heart, the greatness of the heart Stampede Wrestling back in the day, is ridiculous. Rather than like honoring the tradition and carrying it on, people try and kind of relive it. And I think that's never going to work.
I mean, I have not heard like a lot of, positive things about all the like Heart Legacy revivals and stuff. Like, it's kind of, it is very sad, because like you want wrestling to be like represented as like a good thing and stuff, and when you go down there and then you use like the Heart name, but then they don't have referees at the show. They haven't, like, there's all kinds of problems and stuff. It's kind of a bummer, like,
for
it makes
sure.
the whole operation look rinky dink, because you're putting like the biggest name on the most, rinky dink operation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's
And I'm not trying to kind of like bury Heart Legacy or anything. I just
no.
Yeah.
It's just our opinions, and I hope for nothing but the best for people, and hope success in the future. But I also want to encourage people to be as professional as possible.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, but I mean, there has been some leeway. I mean, there has been like some progress made, like you say, like everything with MRB. Like, it's interesting now because RCW, where I wrestle for Steven, right, for Steven Waschuk Squig. For longest time, we didn't interact with like guys from MPW and PWA. Like, we didn't have them on our shows unless it was like an out of town show, right? But now it's kind of become like it's like the like proverbial forbidden door has been open, because we've been having a lot of like PWA and MPW wrestlers just show up and wrestle on our shows, and I think it's fantastic.
No, for sure. It's important to have those things. Like, that was one of the things that was a thing in every region, kind of these ideas of like owning specific talent, owning independent talent. It's ridiculous, the idea that you could own somebody that you're not paying full time. You know what I mean? If you're not paying me not to be on their shows, then I'm going to do their shows. You don't own any talent, and saying that, like, yeah, trying to do that is ridiculous. And so I'm glad to see that those forbidden doors have been so-called forbidden doors have been broken, where I think they were made of cellophane to begin with. But yeah, I'm glad to see that people are able to work with other people and have different opportunities and explore, work with each other, and then work with each other's strengths and weaknesses and learn from each other that way.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, even like we were just a part of the Love Wrestling thing, which that didn't just use guys from all three local promotions here in Alberta, but like guys from all over the country. Like, I don't know what the status of like Holden Albright and Casey Spinelli's status in Ontario. Maybe they're from different promotions out there, right? Like, so the fact that all came together and they did the change the game thing, I think is a really special thing. How did you end up getting involved in that whole operation?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what they did over at Love Wrestling was a really special thing, and I think the name fits perfectly for what Alberta needs right now, and the whole operation in general had the ethos of what Alberta and wrestling in general could use right now. So I've been in talks with Spencer for quite a while, with Spencer Love for quite a while, just kind of being both wrestling people from similar areas that we kind of have similar interests as well outside of wrestling. So he reached out to me at one point, and I had done his podcast, and then he kind of mentioned to me that he might be wanting to do a show sometime, and then I'd shown my interest in wanting to work for him. So it kind of just snowballed from there. He kind of took that lead and ran with it, and he saw an opening in wrestling in general, not just Alberta wrestling, but Canadian wrestling, to kind of bring everyone together and kind of have that, like a show with no forbidden doors or whatever you want to call it, and just a place where we could all unite as wrestlers who love wrestling and wrestling fans who love wrestling, pun intended, not pun intended, but a place where we could all gather and feel safe and do what we love to do and do it in a safe way. So that's kind of when I heard he was doing that. Alberta wrestling's always held a big place in my heart, and I haven't been there in so long that it felt like the perfect way for me to come back.
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to see definitely a little bit of your match, and I thought that your presentation was fantastic. Like, very like outside the box, like stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, like it just like it wasn't like your average like guy in tights going out there and wrestling. Like there was a lot of like fun and like just like extra entertainment stuff put into it, which I really appreciate. I mean, of course.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I try to go out I try to present the wrestler that I would have wanted to see, and a wrestler that, like I said, that might fill in a place that wasn't ever, had the spotlight put on it before. So I think I fit that mold. I think I fit that mold quite well, and I'm happy to wear it.
Yeah. How did your character evolve to like become what it is now? Did you start off as like more of a straight laced, meat and potatoes guy, and then sort of evolve into the more over the top thing, or did you always be like this as flamboyant and whatnot as you were at the Love Wrestling show?
I've definitely been an evolution of my character over the years. I've always had the same name. I've never changed that. It's always been Randy Myers ever since I had my first backyard wrestling match. But from where I started, it was kind of I would never say I was meat and potatoes. I was never interested in doing that. I was always interested in doing the more showy side of wrestling. I've never been into sports. I've never yeah. So I'd rather do something that's more showy. And so, yeah, it's just evolved over the years, one piece at a time, of kind of eroding what I was trying to show, coming out originally, trying to fill the hole of kind of my own lack of masculine role models in my life, and my own maybe lack of masculinity there's attributed to by that. So trying to be maybe more macho to begin with, and then slowly but surely had those kind of like I say, eroded away, first showing my punk rock side, then being a little bit more open about my mental health stuff, and then more open about my sexuality and my gender and stuff like that as it comes more and more. So kind of yeah, the more I felt comfortable in the ring, the more I felt exposing myself in the ring while keeping my pants on.
Right on, right on. So it's all kind of like has your outlet in wrestling like has that helped you in your real life, like the fact that you can go out there in the middle of the ring and just basically do like whatever you want? Has that like helped you like deal in life with like, I mean, like your sexuality and your mental health and that sort of thing?
It's been both, I'd say, like hard to deal with in that way, being in a hyper masculine world that is wrestling. To be kind of open about that stuff is, at least up until recently, was kind of taboo. Um, Definitely in kind of some of the older scenes, but it's been definitely, the fans have never had a problem with it. Like, at least from my experience, every time I presented that way, uh, my truth to the fans, the more honest I've been, the more they've been accepting of me. But I think that comes with more accepting crowds too. I don't think there's any way I could have come out in an Alberta ring.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, I would have
Yeah.
been a heel 100% of the time. And that to me, I had no interest in being the status quo. I'm different than you, so that means be scared of me, or
Yeah.
anything like that. That to me is like such a turn off. And so othering that I wasn't interested in doing that. So being that I am pansexual, bisexual, whatever, I can play a more macho side. I would always present that side when I was in the ring because I knew that that side was less likely to be called nasty things and was less likely to, like, was less vulnerable of me to show. So it was a side that I felt was more of an armor than anything else. And being like, always being kind of a feminine, I'd had been made fun of in the past for it growing up and stuff like that. So it was a sensitive spot. So it wasn't something I was comfortable showing in Alberta. So that was more a thing that kind of came out when I started doing work out in Vancouver and then in Washington as well.
Have you had to deal with like uncomfortable situations where like maybe the crowd goes off and like starts like chanting homophobic slurs or anything like that? Like, how do you deal with that sort of thing?
That doesn't happen out here.
Well, that's
In
good.
Yeah, I've never had that happen to me once. I've only had that happen to me when I wasn't playing this character in Alberta.
Really?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my experience with it, which led me to some hesitancy to come to do the Love Wrestling show. As much as I was on board with working for Spencer and working with MRB and coming back and seeing all my fans and stuff, there was that hesitation of being able to present myself how I'm most comfortable presenting myself in front of an audience that, or an audience that is, not that the Edmonton audience was ever bad to me. They were always really sweet to me, but an audience that maybe wasn't ready, or not ready, but just hadn't seen me in that light before, hadn't seen me living my authentic self. And that could be jarring at times when people are used to one presentation and they see a new one.
Yeah, no, I kind of hear what you're trying to get at for sure. Um, like, is that like a that's a weird thing to me because like I don't know, I like I can't really relate because like I don't know, like I'm like a straight male white guy, right?
Yeah,
So like, but like I have hard, like I just can't. It boggles my mind that you would be more concerned about the reaction of like the fans rather like than the guys. But then like that also like it like that's saying something too, right? Like I was like, who would be more like resistant to just like being openly like who you are in the world? Would it be the fans or would it be like the other wrestlers who do kind of have like a like like it's kind of a testosterone driven thing, like it's a bit of a boys club, you know what I mean?
yeah, that's what is kind of, which was, I didn't feel that at all at the Love Wrestling show. I have felt that at the past at wrestling shows all over the world. So that's not necessarily Alberta at all. It's just where I came up, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's a politically charged time right now too. Like, there's a lot of like federations and stuff that are having to deal with the whole COVID restrictions and all that. I know that like out in Winnipeg, it's a real hot button issue and stuff. And like, I try not to really like go off and get political on like, publicly, because I don't know. I just don't think anyone really cares about my personal political opinions and stuff. But I am very much like, hey, do what you want to do, be who you want to be. Like, just don't hurt other people. Like,
Yeah, no, for sure.
kind of the where I fall onto like politics. But like, it is like a weird, like politically charged time right now, and like all over the world. But we're also just like, we're all clamoring to be in the ring because it's been something that's we took for granted for so long, and then was like, oh no, like under certain circumstances you're not allowed to put on shows.
Totally. It was something that like everything, like we're so privileged here in like North America and just in general in the world, the time that we live in, that we have so much just at our fingertips and our disposal all the time that we can kind of like, yeah, take all these things for granted. We could pretty much do anything pre-COVID that we wanted to do within reason. And now to have all that taken away, I think, yeah, we do realize how much we miss it and stuff like that. And I think it has shown a lot of things that like what people are willing to do and safety concerns that people are willing to toss to the side just so that they can get their wrestling fix. I understand wrestling is what it does is it gives us all adrenaline and it gives us all, it boosts our ego. So it's really a drug. So I understand that people going without the drug that they've been accustomed to for, years and years and years, and then not having that drug to kind of coursing through their veins is painful and hurts. But yeah, you got to take care of people the best you can. And we've all got to make sacrifices, unfortunately. And that was the one that a lot of us performers had to make.
Yeah. And I mean, it is fortunate that like that shows are like happening, and like for the most part of all the ones I've like been a part of, everybody is doing their part to make sure that what is going on at these shows is being done like as safely as possible.
Totally.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. I know you mentioned earlier that you didn't have any like interest in like the sports side of wrestling, and you were more interested in the theater. And I know that for a while you were involved in improv. How did you get involved in improv?
Well, I was actually something I'd always been interested in. So I came into wrestling being that I was a theater kid growing up. I was super hyper in my high school days. So I ended up getting kicked out of drama class because I just refused to settle down, and I kept taking wrestling bumps and was just a wild Tasmanian devil. So that kind of left a void in my artistic endeavors, which is kind of something I'd always pursued. So getting involved in wrestling was like kind of placeholder for, not placeholder, but was kind of like it was my ultimate form of theater. But improv was always something that I wanted to explore as well. Comedy's always been something that's been like, before wrestling, I was always interested in doing comedy. So the idea was like, I wanted to do either improv or I wanted to do wrestling. I went to improv class when I was 17. Everyone was in their mid-30s. I went to a wrestling class. Everyone was 15, 16, 17. So I'm like, oh, I got to wrestle first, and then I can do improv later. So when I was living out here and I got the opportunity to be like a guest spot as a local wrestler and do an improv show, I jumped at it, and then kind of met some friends through there, and then they sunk their talents into me, and I was part of their community for 4+ years and had some wonderful times and made some lifelong friends, and yeah, learned some cool stuff. So I recommend improv for anyone like interested in doing anything within the entertainment field, and or even just wanting to get more comfortable in your own skin. It's a great tool for your tool belt.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like I did a lot of like improv when I was in high school, and then like after that, I was weird though. Like I was like, oh, there's a bunch of 30-year-olds here. This is perfect. You know. So anyway, I did a bunch of improv like back in the day, and then I found out like it kind of dawned on me pretty quick that like a wrestling match is like an improv game. It's just a
Yeah, for
little
sure.
bit more physical, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, a lot more physical in some cases, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like and I think that's one of my favorite parts about wrestling is sometimes like, you know, like there's been times where the you know, promoter will be like, "Okay, go out there and then do a promo and then have your match and stuff." And it's like, "Okay, cool." And then you walk out there and you think of your promo while you have the microphone in your hand and you're talking, and sometimes it works really well, and you know, once in a blue moon it doesn't, but like when it does, it's like that's like magical. You know what I
For
mean?
sure. Totally. Those are those moments that like, yeah, when you're feeding off the energy of the crowd and you've got like that your confidence in yourself and you know like a little bit of something you might say, but like some bullet points, but you go out there and just kind of half wing it. Those, yeah, magic can happen definitely there. You leave room for that magic, right? Where if everything's planned out meticulously and practiced a million times, then it's probably not even going to be the best time you did it when you're out there. You know, if you practice it 50 times in your mirror and then you do it once in the ring, probably like the 39th time you practiced it in the mirror was the best one. And the one in front of the audience is, you know? So leaving room for some improv is great.
Yeah. Well, how, would you apply that to like the physicality of your matches too? Because like I know that like once in a while I'll show up and they'll have me wrestling with somebody that's like from that's been wrestling for a very long time, and like yeah, I walk up and they'll be like, "Oh, what do you want to do tonight in the match?" And they're just like, "Oh yeah, whatever. I'll see you out there tonight. You know how to wrestle." And it's like, "Oh, okay." Like it's just like a complete improv match. And then sometimes you talk to some people and they want to plan every single thing that happens. Like, where do you kind of fall on that spectrum?
Well, I think that I don't know. I think that's just different, definitely different styles where people have been taught and comfortability and stuff like that. Also, kind of what kind of style you match you want to have. It's really hard to call like a complicated high spot on the fly. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? With like all sorts of counters and reversals and stuff like that, especially not knowing necessarily what your competitive, like the person you're wrestling can do. So I think if you're going out there, you like that, you're probably going to have more likely a body slam, kick, punch, chop, stay in the corner, move on a clothesline kind of match where it's going to be fine, but it's not necessarily going to have the intricacy um, of a planned match. So I
Yeah.
personally want to go in there with a plan of some sort for sure. Um, I think that's just likely the best way to do it, especially if I've never wrestled the person before. I think it's kind of like I don't know what they do. I don't know how great they are or whatever, and I don't know how good they're going to take my moves. So I also don't want to do the same moves everyone's seen a million times. So knowing you can take a hip toss is great, but I'm probably not going to do a hip toss in my match, so that's not super useful.
Okay. Yeah. Like I just like I think that it's good to have like a little bit of a balance for sure too. And
For sure, yeah, leave a little bit of room, like I said, for that magic to happen. You know.
yeah, like and I'll be honest, like when I did like walk up to the guy and he's like, "Yeah, you know how to wrestle. I'll see you out there." I would almost like shit my pants. I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
Like
yeah, no, I don't know. I think we're putting each other's like our lives in each other's hands. I'm not afraid to say no to a move. If
yeah.
somebody wants to like, hey, I'm going to give you the Tiger Buster 97 off the third rope to the second row, I'll be fuck you. No, you're not. Like, so if you're calling that to me in the ring, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, there's just kind of, we need to know each other's limitations when we go out there. We're giving each other our bodies and stuff like that. So I don't want to be like finding limitations in the ring or have you call a spot and have me be like, no, in the ring, you know? So I'd rather know all that stuff in the back. And if you leave room, there's obviously going to be little things and who cares about this or that. But like, there's certain things I think we need to call in the back to just make sure it's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Like 100%. I mean, especially like I feel like if you're gonna like use like weapons or anything like that, that
Oh
needs to
God,
be
yeah,
discussed beforehand. Like,
totally. It's
yeah,
like wrestling is like sex. It's like you're not gonna be like halfway through sex and start using like some crazy fucking BDSM tool on somebody, whipping them or something like that, and then be like, "Oh, I thought you were cool with this because we were making out." Like that's not necessarily how things work. Let's ask up front.
yeah, yeah, of course, the 100% for sure. I also know, just touching off the improv thing, that you made a film. You were part of a film, The Weirdo Hero. Can you just tell me a little bit more about the movie? How did that come together? What was like your role in the making of the film? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about it.
For sure. It's called, yeah, it's The Weirdo Hero. It's a web series now, but it was originally made as like a film, and we showed it one time at a beautiful big screen theater out here, and felt really cool to see my little face up there. So it was a story about a wrestler who's finally won the local championship belt. Thought that would kind of fix all of his like woes in life and like solve his mental health issues. And when it didn't, then it brings him like brings up his depression even stronger. And then kind of his turmoils through working a daytime job, like a 9 to 5 job during the week, and living this life as a hero on the weekend, and kind of having trouble with like that duality of that, and that kind of like head games that'll play on you, kind of almost like sometimes it feels like forced bipolar, where it's like on the weekend you're having your name chanted by X amount of lovely individuals in in a wrestling audience, and then on Monday you're getting yelled at by your boss for not wearing the right colored socks, you know. So it's kind of about the trials and tribulations, as cheesy as that sounds, of an independent professional wrestler dealing with mental health issues.
Solid. Is acting something that you were going to pursue? Like, is there any other projects you've tried to become involved in?
Yeah, I'm always willing to like take on any kind of creative project, assuming like the heart's in the right place and I'm interested in working with the people doing it. So yeah, I'd never say never to anything like that. I've always like acting's always been something that's been like an interest of mine, and so yeah, I'm not opposed to doing more stuff. I'm currently just doing some stand-up stuff, so that's kind of where I've been focusing my energy during quarantine. When I couldn't be in the ring, I jumped on that stand-up stage. So that's kind of where my artistic endeavors have been mainly focused outside of the ring.
Like stand-up comedy.
Yeah, that's where I've been doing. So that was always kind of something I've been interested in. Like we said, I did improv comedy. I've done, and then I kind of moved from that into like sketch comedy. And then from that, I moved into doing straight up stand up. So now I'm doing like, yeah, 5 minute sets here and there around town. And it's been super fun. And the community's been really like inviting and like been really sweet, and it's interesting to be around like a different form of entertainer.
How would you relate like the politics and like the atmosphere of like comedy to wrestling? Like, if you have a group of comedians, how similar is that to having a group of like wrestlers? You know, like in a social situation. Like, do you understand what I'm
The,
kind of getting at?
yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely like that strong sense of testosterone in both vibes, because they are both kind of unfortunately boys clubs for the most part. I tend to like lean towards feminine energy. So I mean, whenever I find like female wrestlers or anyone who's like kind of like they're not necessarily presenting entirely as masculine, I'm kind of lean towards that. So there is a lot of masculinity within comedy, but then there's also this wonderful thing where in wrestling everyone wants to look like they're a member of the X-Men. You know what I mean? We've all got our own superpower, but we're all also like perfect in every single way. And comedy's more about showing your flaws. So it's kind of like to be out as a comedian with mental health issues is like, yeah, we all have mental health issues, buddy. No big deal. Where being out as a comedian with or a wrestler with mental health issues is more of a rarity. So it's kind of interesting to see. That would be, I would say, the biggest difference between the two crews is one of them is like proud of their flaws and shows them off, and the other one tries to hide all their flaws and talk about how great they are. So that's kind of like the differences, I would say.
Okay, well, I mean that's pretty interesting for sure.
I mean, that's broad. Obviously, there's like different shades and everything, but that's what I would say. The average stand-up is going to go up there and talk to you about maybe what's wrong with them, where the average promo is definitely not going to talk to you about what's wrong with them. It's going to be talking about how big their biceps are and how strong they are and how great their finishing move is. And so it's kind of fun to see the other side of that, where people are promoting themselves for their lesser, for their flaws, for what's seen as flaws, I guess.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's yeah, I understand what you're saying because like yeah, you wouldn't there it would be hard to cut a promo and like I mean you could try to humanize yourself maybe by like saying hey these are my flaws but this is how I'm going to overcome them and beat you on Sunday, you know? Like
yeah, no, for sure. Exactly. It always comes down to that in wrestling. So it's kind of nice to have an opportunity to kind of emote some different emotions that it's harder to pull out from a wrestling performance.
so I just wanted to get your thoughts too on some of the other talent. I know that you're still a part of the Vancouver scene and that they've just launched a new wrestling organization out there called New NEW.
Indeed, yep.
Can you tell us a
Nation
little bit
Extreme
about
Wrestling, yeah.
yeah? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your involvement has been thus far and where you're hoping things will go with that?
So far, I've just done the new 2 show. I wrestled an ex or a former foe of mine, and Dave Bishop, and he's a phenomenal talent out here. So yeah, I think what New's trying to do is very similar to what Love Wrestling is trying to do with trying to explore the talent that is kind of based within Canada and put a spotlight on Canadian talent where it's never been before. So kind of like going back to one of our earlier questions about how there isn't necessarily the spotlight on Canadian talent. I think right now there's a couple different people trying to do that very thing. And I'm very honored to be part of New, and they've got some really great talent on that roster and like bringing in surprises all the time and are running things on a professional level that I've never seen done in Canada. So I think their potential is really like, I don't know, I've never seen anything run like this. So their potential is more than I've seen from other promotions.
Yeah, that's fair. I saw like some photos on Instagram and some like small clips on YouTube and stuff, and I was really impressed with like the production value.
For sure, yeah.
There was like an actual like big screen there with people like had their videos and stuff, and we definitely were aiming to have that at the Love Wrestling thing, but we had a couple of little first time out troubles or whatnot, but the
Which is to be
NEWs
expected, but
yeah, the NEWs seemed to have like the full blown like pay-per-view presentation setup, and it was really like I was really impressed with everything that I've seen.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I've been doing this, like we said, for quite a while. So, and been doing it in the Canadian scene for quite a while, and I've seen people try and do something, but I've never seen anything pulled off on this level thus far. So, and I think it's just going to be bigger and better things. So, New 3, November 27th is the first show, and then part 1 of New 3, and then New 3B or part 2 would be December 3rd. Both of those shows are going to be in Vancouver, and they're going to be phenomenal big shows at a nice, beautiful venue downtown. So,
New
19 plus venue. So,
sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know. Is that what it is? New 3B? New 3B, right?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't seen the advertisements for the third.
I don't think there is one. I think we're making it up on the fly right here. So either New 3B or New 3.2.
Night 2 of New 3B.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Night 2 of New 3B. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Well,
which won't be in 3D.
Yeah, definitely, folks. If you do get a chance to go check out that, Randy, let's hit your your social media plugs and whatnot, and then after that, I guess we'll talk a little bit about your ventures into the WWE.
Sure. You can find me at the Weirdo Hero on Instagram, or at Ravenous Randy on Twitter, or Randy Myers on Facebook. You can message me on any one of those. My DMs are always open, so slide on in, puppies. I'm happy to answer any sort of questions or booking inquiries. I'm always open for stand-up bookings. I'll do your improv show. I'll do your wrestling show. I'll do a burlesque show if you want me to. I'll jump out of a cake. I won't exterminate your apartment, but I do make a hell of a stepfather.
Have you ever jumped out of a cake before? Is that a thing?
No, but I would. I've been in a dunk tank before, but I've never jumped out of a cake. But it's bucket list things.
I definitely proposed the idea to Spencer Love of having like them wheel out a giant egg for me to hatch out of. Just gonna wrestle
Gobbledygooker style.
Yeah, 100%. And it was just like, well, where are we going to acquire a giant egg? And so it didn't end up happening.
Make it out of paper mache. That's why Spencer needs me around. He needs somebody crafty like me.
That would have been helpful. It would have been great, I think.
Agreed. We'll push for that.
Yeah,
never say never.
Love Wrestling night 2 of Love Wrestling 3. We'll try and get it done.
Yeah, night 2, part 3. B. Yep.
You did mention that you were going to be in the WWE in 2009, and that it didn't end up working out. But like, how close did you come? Did you end up wrestling on any like SmackDowns before the show or anything like that?
No, I've never actually had like a match inside a WWE ring in front of an audience. Just at like tryouts and stuff like that, and before the shows, but never like I said, in front of a live audience. No dark matches or anything. So in 2009, I went down to Florida for a tryout that they were holding at the time. It was one of those tryouts where you paid $1,000 and then they would give you a tryout, which was a great opportunity. And I just really wanted to learn from WWE people and kind of see what it took to be there. I knew that they were going to be awarding 2 contracts at the end of the camp, but I had that wasn't what I was going there for. I knew I still had a lot of growth to do as an entertainer and as a wrestler. So I just went down there to like kind of meet people and network and like kind of like get my foot in the door, but more so just learn. And at that time, like I said, it was 2009. It was actually in FCW, what was FCW at the time, so Florida Championship Wrestling, which was owned by Steve Kern. So at that point, there was like Steve Kern was there. They were running developmental out of there. So Dusty Rhodes was working there. Kidman was one of the trainers. Norman Smiley. There was a whole bunch of like phenomenal in-ring like trainers.
Yeah, a lot of those people are still at the like performance center.
Totally, yeah. So they're people that work for WWE for a long time. And then we do promos at the end of every one of our days. So we'd be basically wrestling for 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe even longer. And then with a lunch break in between or whatever. And then at the end of the day, we'd end off with a promo every time. And then Dusty would like watch those promos. And that was where I was like doing well. I'd gone down there with promos have always kind of been my bag, or I've been comfortable talking, gabbing, as you can probably tell by me running off in the mouth on this podcast. But I've always been comfortable talking, so I was able to do that. And Dusty took a liking to my promo. And so he called me out and he was using me as an example of what he liked. And so I could tell, I was like, oh, this is cool. It was really like such an honor to be like this Dusty Rhodes. Like his promos are so great and renowned. And here he is like throwing a biscuit and saying mine aren't bad. So he was really sweet and encouraging, and actually encouraged my feminine side. Mentioned that it reminded him of Dustin, of his son, who was playing Gold Dust at the time. So it was like quite a compliment. It was the first time I had ever had my feminine side noticed by a wrestler and not made fun of. It was embraced rather than mocked. So that was really lovely. And so then I came home expecting nothing of it, waited on my like evaluation card, and then got a call from one of the people working at WWE at the time, and they offered me a contract.
Oh, solid.
So yeah, it was really cool. So they called me and were like, "We'd like to extend an offer to you for a wrestling contract." And they had mentioned that they thought I was a little small, so if I could put on some size, that would have been great. They really emphasized to not use any sort of enhancing drugs to gain that size.
Yeah.
And then we started the process of me getting a work visa and all that stuff for my move down to Florida at the time. So I made it all the way to the drug test, and then I got popped for smoking pot. And then they called me and they said, the first phone call we got, they said that marijuana was a fine, that it was a $500 fine, and that you wouldn't lose your job, but you would be fined.
Oh.
And dealing with a lot of anxiety, almost like I knew it was there, but it was untreated anxiety that I was dealing with, and depression and all this stuff. And I was an addiction to marijuana. I was like, well, I had still had some pot in my system when I went down. I got popped. They called me and they said they were going to have to rescind the contract.
Oh.
So I thought if I got popped, I was going to like pay a $500 fine and it was going to suck. But the contract they offered me was going to be making more money than I had ever been making before in my life at that point. So I was like, I would have had
the roster, like probably, smoke.
Yeah, I don't know. At that time, I don't know. I know that it was also we're talking post Guerrero, post Benoit, an era where they were very hesitant about drug use and where things were very, very, very much not okay to be doing any sort of drugs. So, yep, they called me up and they told me that they had to rescind my contract and that they'd popped me for marijuana. So then that led to more depression and more anxiety. And yeah, then but I had two choices like in front of me. I could either like quit wrestling, or I could continue doing it for like the love of it and try and get back in WWE's good graces and hopefully show up there again one day.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I just knew that it was all I knew and it was where my life was and my friends. So as much as it was really hard to eat crow, because I'd done my full like goodbye tour and like crying in the ring and like all the wrestlers coming out and like applauding me and the goodbye Randy chants and all the thank yous and all that stuff, and then to come back and be like, oh hey, I didn't go, was hard. And it was hard for me to be honest about why I didn't go, and people were nice enough that they weren't too prying about it, but it was definitely awkward and I didn't know where I wanted to go from there. But going back into the ring was the best thing I could have done. You asked earlier if it's ever helped with my mental health, and that was definitely one of many occasions where it gave me the outlet I needed. An outlet when I wanted to hurt myself, an outlet when I wanted to show the world how much pain I was in, but they weren't necessarily going to understand my emotional pain, but my physical pain they could see.
Yeah.
And that was easy to show them and to put out. So that's what I did. And I went back into the ring, and Kurt Sorokin was nice enough to bring me back and back into the fold. And from there, I guess I didn't really look back and went back for another tryout in 2012. It was a different crew of people. Dusty was still there at the time. They weren't so focused on promos, and I wasn't as good as I was the first time I went. I wasn't as or I don't know. I just didn't get picked the second time, and it was what it was. But it was like I met so many great people and lived so many great opportunities that I wouldn't have lived if I had gone to WWE. I would have had great opportunities there, no doubt, but I wouldn't have got to make the Weirdo hero necessarily. I wouldn't have got to do improv, live those dreams. Currently be living my stand-up dream. I don't know whether I would have ever even been able to come out in that atmosphere. You know what I mean?
I think that, don't get me wrong, I don't think that anyone's success as a wrestler is necessarily dictated by whether or not they went to WWE. Like, I know a lot of great wrestlers that have never been in WWE.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. And, so I wouldn't hold yourself to, thinking, I wouldn't feel like, you had to stop wrestling because they didn't want you at that time. I'm curious though, like if their stance on marijuana has like softened up, especially like on the Canadian boys, because like it's pretty much legal now, isn't it? So like,
Yeah, I don't know. I know that like it is, but then there's also like depending on which state you're in, they can kind of have it be like state dependent. They can also like under any sort of athletic contract, they can kind of decide what substances are banned and what substances aren't banned, even down to like vitamins and stuff like that. So they can be very particular. I know that definitely they're not going to lose a big talent for smoking marijuana. They're not going to fire them at this point. But I was not that. So, I mean, I know that like they told me not to. I understood that it would have been a fine, but then it ended up being more than a fine. So I fucked up, and I don't blame them for any of that. And it is what it is, and it was just part of my story and my journey thus far.
yeah, I mean that's the craziest part to me is that like they were like, yeah, we're gonna hire you, and then they just changed their mind because you smoke some pot. Like
Yeah, for
to
sure.
me, I'm just like, big deal.
Yeah, no, for sure. Right? Super weird.
Yeah, for sure. So having like not actually wrestled on like a SmackDown or anything, what would you say the biggest crowd you've performed in front of was?
Uh, Geez, there's been a couple different times where like there's one time I wrestled at like a big festival in Ottawa, and I believe that there was close to 2,000 people in that audience. So that was a pretty big draw that night. And it was just kind of one of those things. It was like the Stampede. It was like the Capital X, I believe it was, in Ottawa. And Bret Hart was on that show, Christian Cage, AJ Styles. So it was a bunch of big names. And I think there was, 2,000 people in that arena that night. So that's probably my biggest audience. That or one time I did a tour of the UK. And for some reason, one night there was like, I don't know, just all the kids in the UK felt like we're at this show. And there was just like probably in reality, probably just over 1,000 just children. So, and then there was parents on top of that. So there wasn't a definite number that night, but it would have to be one of those two shows.
Oh, okay. What was it like wrestling in the UK and doing like a tour over there?
Oh, it was super fun. It was different. It was interesting to be wrestling like every night as opposed to like the normal Canadian schedule of like once every 2 weeks or whatever, right? So it was like all the time in front of like audiences and like a different audience and harder rings. So the style was definitely not as hard hitting. You weren't going to want to take as many bumps, especially if you're having to do it every night, 5 days a week, in harder rings. So it was definitely like a bit of a change to like learn a different style somewhat or acclimatize to their style. But it was like they were super fun, and I met some people over there that again are like still friends to this day, and memories that I'll cherish forever. So it was cool. It's if you can get a chance to wrestle anywhere different, step outside of like your normal crew of people, it's great. We find like wrestlers are wrestlers no matter where you find them, and it's a common bond that we share. It's like family, right? So no matter where you go, if there's wrestling, you'll find a friend.
Have you gone to like Japan or Mexico?
I haven't gone to Japan or Mexico. I find with like again, it's like so much different styles in different places. For me, the lucha style or the hard hitting Japanese style has never really been like something I've wanted to do. It's not really just my pace, and it's not that there isn't wrestling that could be my pace in those places. I just haven't had that in my like. I have a lot of weird dreams, but those two haven't been things that I've set in motion so far.
Okay, I like when I think of like sort of like the wrestling, the main territories, I do think of like the Canada and America, then like Mexico, Japan, and then like Europe.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I think like I guess it's all very different though. I think is one thing that I think kind of gets forgotten in that. Like I have so many times I'll have people tell me, well, if you want to make it a wrestler, why don't you move to Japan? And I'll look at them and be like, well, if you want to make it as a plumber, why don't you move to Taiwan? Like you wouldn't do that with any other job. Like you wouldn't be told move out of your country because you want to be good at the thing you do.
No.
You know what I mean? Like if you want to be like, I don't know, like whatever kind of thing, like I want to run a daycare. Well, you're not going to be able to run a daycare unless you do it in Germany. Like, no, come on. We should be able to do whatever we want, where the fuck we want to do it. And that's where like having these promotions like Love Wrestling and New and things like that, that'll have hopefully an opportunity for Canadian wrestlers to make a name for themselves and to make some money for their pockets. So, you know, we don't have to we can put Canada on the map. We can be the stars in our own country.
Yeah, 100%. It's been a great hour talking to you, Randy. We are gonna wrap it up here, just because I don't want to take up all of your time. But
let's wrap it like a Christmas present, my friend.
Okay, I just want to say thanks again for coming on the show. It was really great to see you at the Love Wrestling Change the Game thing. Hopefully we'll get to see you at more events, whether that means you're coming back out here or I'm going out there to,
hopefully both.
Spread
hopefully
my
we
wings.
can get your egg touring across the Canada, Get that egg, the Cross Canada Egg Tour.
Yeah.
On show A, show B, show C.
Yep. Night 2 of
of Z, part 4, Return of the Living Ring.
Yeah. On the pre-show. There we go.
Exactly. Well, of course. Yeah, I mean, come on. Don't get your head too big,
Yeah. Alrighty. Awesome Possum. This has been Monday Night Shaw with Ravenous Randy Myers. Thank you very much again for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you again soon. And for everybody listening, thank you very much, and we will talk to you again very soon as well.
Bye.